Welcome to the Answer is Yes podcast, where we interview some of the most interesting people that have said yes to opportunities in their life. We hope that through these stories, you can learn to create your own destiny by saying yes along the way. Join us as we explore the new series covering topics such as passion, integrity, and hard work. I'm your host, Jim Riley, and I hope you enjoy these interviews as much as I do. I believe that everyone has an important message worth hearing. Hello and welcome to the show. This week I sit down with Danielle Abella. Danielle's the founder of Excelsior Films, and what I really appreciate about this interview, especially if you're in college or you're thinking about what direction to go in your career, and this might even apply if you're already in your career and it's just not working out for you. Daniel spends a lot of time in today's interview talking about two paths that he went down early on through college in the radio industry, and something that he felt he was very passionate about and thought that this is exactly what he wanted to do. And then later on into the sports industry, all come to find out that they led to dead ends for him, where he found his real passion through a little family tragedy in his mom's illness. And that real passion was filmmaking. And now, as the founder of a film company, he's already produced a successful award-winning short, and he gets to tell a story. So I hope you enjoy it. Again, I really do think that this message will resonate with those people that are looking for some direction or just not quite sure of what they should be doing. Welcome to the Answer is Yes podcast. We are in for another show and another treat. I've got a great guest on today. His name is Daniel Abella. Daniel, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great. How are you doing today, Jim?
I'm doing well. Just enjoying some sunny California, and I know you're up in NorCal. How's things going up there for you?
I mean, it's a little windy, but you know what? The sun is out, so I can't complain.
Yeah. Well, appreciate you getting on the air with us. For my listeners, I've been working with Daniel on a project of his. It's in the film industry, and we're going to talk about it at the end of the show. But what was fascinating that I learned about Daniel was his path to getting there, and I think that that's what's so appropriate for the show today. Oftentimes we talk about making decisions in life and saying yes to things, and sometimes we realize that yes should have been a no, or it's not what we thought it was going to be. And Daniel, I think you have a wonderful story of how you got to where you're at today in the film industry. Would you mind sharing with us a little bit of background, maybe touch on before you went to college and why you decided to go to college and what some of the avenues you went to in that spectrum?
Sure. So I guess I think my story, at least my educational story, kind of starts with my brother. My brother is 6 years older than me and so much smarter than I ever will be. And I don't mean that as a knock against myself, but sometimes you know someone and you talk to them, and as often as I talk to my brother, he's my best friend, you start listening to how they approach things, and you realize that they're on a special level. And my brother got the opportunity to be I don't want to say the first in my family, but one of the first in my family to get a chance to go to college. Mm-hmm. And he got into UCLA, and seeing how well he did there and how well he did in school in general kind of propelled me to want to follow in those footsteps. And the thing about it was I didn't necessarily want to do exactly the same thing he did in terms of, only applying to a few schools and kind of just going to the kind of nearby great school. I wanted to go somewhere different. So I put out a massive kind of list of schools that I would, consider. And I wanted to do something completely different. So I looked at places in the South. I looked at places on the East Coast. I, of course, looked in, my home state of California. We have some great schools out here, but, I didn't limit it to just a couple of schools and most of them being on the West Coast as my brother did. And I ended up applying to 15 colleges. I got into 12 or 13 of them, wow, which was a big deal for me for a few reasons. Number one, I never thought I would get into as many schools, in part because I didn't necessarily think I was that smart, but in part also because the last time I had an application, a large, dearth of applications out for high schools in San Francisco, you need to apply to get into high schools. It's not just kind of going in and deciding, oh, this is the nearby high school and I'm just going there. You have to actually apply.
Really?
I actually didn't get into any schools. I had to settle for a charter school, which is kind of the lowest rung, or at the time was the lowest rung of schools. And this school had just been, had only been around for a couple of years. So the high school I went to, so I kind of didn't think that I would get accepted into as many schools after going 0 for 7 across San Francisco high schools that accepted, applications. Other ones that just let you in, like my charter school, obviously are different, but they're also not necessarily on the highest tier on the educational level. So I was surprised to get into as many schools as I did, and I was surprised to get into some of the schools that I specifically got into, namely American University, which at the time was the #1 journalism school. I got into my eventual alma mater, Penn State, as well as some other really good schools, Loyola Marymount, University of San Francisco, a few other ones to, go along. But I ended up opting to go to Penn State because Penn State was something very different. I'm proudly urban. I come from a very urban part of San Francisco, a part that doesn't really get shown on, on movies or TV or in postcards.
Mm-hmm.
That's not to make my area seem like it's a dire area. It's not that. It's just very, different than what you see on, in pop culture regarding San Francisco. So I wanted to do something very different, and I had never seen the snow, and I had never seen, the kind of change from, summer to fall to, spring and so on and so forth. I never got to see that because that doesn't really happen here in California. So those two things, as well as the fact that at the time I really wanted to be a sports radio show host. I was a diehard sports fan, but I used to analyze what was going on in a way that kind of mirrored what you would hear on broadcasts or you would hear on the post-game shows for, any given team. Mm-hmm. So for me, it seemed like a natural fit. I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just sounds like an exciting process so far with a great prospect in an industry that seems pretty exciting. I know how the story turns out, but I do want to hear it.
Sure. The other thing I did want to mention is that I always was told that my voice was a really good asset. It's weird to me because I hear myself talk all the time, and it doesn't necessarily sound like anything special, but then I would talk to somebody and they say, oh, you have a really great voice. And it was kind of a compliment I would get over and over again. So in my head, I'm thinking of really loving sports, really loving radio. I would listen to hours of radio at a time, whether I was taking public transportation or, going to the ballpark, going, to a function, what have you. I would a lot of times listen to the radio on my way, which is differing from the norm because a lot of people, would listen to their iPods and, and that's not to say that I wouldn't do that on occasion, but more often than not, I rather listen to people talk, to kind of make me feel like I'm in a conversation. Mm-hmm. So I would go so I got into Penn State and I thought, hey, this is something very different. And in a way, they almost courted me because their journalism program, their sports journalism program, they had one that was specific to sports journalism. They really wanted me to come on down. I had shown some interest and I'd gotten in. All my scores were in. I was taking a bunch of AP classes and, I would get calls or pieces of media from them in a way that none of the other schools really ever sent anything. So it felt like for the first time ever, an institution or an organization wanted me in a way that, I usually felt like I wanted the institution, but never got, the kind of reciprocal kind of relationship from them. And it felt like Penn State really wanted me and it felt like a real good fit.
Yeah.
And again, it was far, it was different. Pennsylvania and California are on two very differing spectrums, geographically. So it just felt like, hey, this is your opportunity to try something very new. And a lot of people don't realize this until they're there, but college is really about transforming yourself from being what you are in high school, what you are as a child, what you are as a maturing, person, to becoming something that you eventually will become as an adult. It's that transformation period, and that's why it's so exciting. So Penn State made sense to me, so I went ahead. I even though I, at certain points, was kind of not sure if I wanted to really take that leap. I got into, as I said, a lot of schools, so there were other options on the table. There were other options that were a lot closer to home, and probably would have made my parents and just overall family feel a lot more comfortable. But, I went ahead and took the leap of faith.
Yeah. Wow. So you went to school, graduated, got your degree in that topic, or what happened from there?
Yeah, so over the next 4 years, I went ahead and made a decision where I was going to put radio, or the attempt to be in radio, ahead of everything. And that included school. And that was, I don't know if it was a mistake per se, but what I would do a lot of times is, so let me rewind a bit. The first week of school, there was an ad out for the local college sports station called Com Radio. And I went to their orientation just to check it out and see what they were offering. And they offered so many opportunities. They offered you the opportunity to have your own radio show. They offered you opportunities to play-by-play for the actual station at the actual arenas where the teams would compete. So at Beaver Stadium for football, Bryce Jordan Center for basketball, so on and so forth. And it allowed you to really hone your craft and build a demo, as well as learn how to use the, different pieces of technology that go into making a broadcast possible. So I got excited instantly. And at first it seemed like everybody was like-minded. And so my thinking was, I'd rather go and do stuff at the station or do stuff at what would eventually be an internship at the local ESPN affiliate than really go to class. That's not to say it was, I never went to class. It wasn't that either. But if it was between me going to a philosophy class where I knew, and this is probably just my thinking, but I knew I wasn't going to use what Socrates was telling me versus going to a radio station and actually learning how to use, this particular, program in the computer to make sure that my voice can sound a certain way so I can sound a lot clearer or what have you. I was always going to choose option 2. Yeah. So over the years, I started going more and more to the station, and eventually when I got my internship, I would go and spend time there. And the thing is that what stuck out to me was that I learned pretty early on in my communications classes was that a lot of the job was about being there. It wasn't so much about skill or talent or anything like that. It was more so about the ability to be there at the right time. Mm-hmm. It was all about timing. At least that's what it was made to seem, and this was in 2007. So, I mean, obviously things changed between then and now. But I just decided I want to be there all the time so that if there's an opportunity, they see me, they go, hey, you come in and do this. All of a sudden I'm irreplaceable. And that always was something that I like to think of myself as someone who is irreplaceable. Yeah. So fast forward over 4 years, doing a show every, week during those 4 years, doing countless broadcasts across multiple sports. I thought I was ready for the big time. So I had been offered a internship, kind of a post-internship, part-time sort of, kind of not really job at one of the, I was really thinking about taking it and I wanted to take it, but unfortunately the money wasn't going to work out. So I ended up coming back home to San Francisco. It was the only thing that made sense financially. Unfortunately, money is always going to be an important factor in things. And